1, 2.
1, 2.
1, 2.
1, 2.
Record test.
Record
Better?
test. Better?
Cool.
Cool.
How is everything with you?
Pretty good.
Pretty good, you okay?
Pretty good. Yeah, you're going okay. And we're all going to survive the summer again.
Yeah, like get out in the busy days,
Yeah.
driving around in the fog.
Hey.
Yeah, I loved yesterday. Wasn't yesterday great?
Yeah. It's a nice break, isn't it?
Oh my God.
It's unusual that we have it so
I
late.
just soaked it right up.
Yeah, I agree. It's nice and cool, and the rain was fine, and no, I agree.
Oh, I could not complain.
Deborah's
Well, I
in a
could,
hotel
because
party.
I actually was going to light the fireplace.
Oh, yeah.
And open the back door and
Yeah.
light a candle, and I couldn't because.
Yeah, I told her, I said, come in the room and just, over the
Solar put on my roof and they did something to my gas fireplace.
No, no.
My gas fireplace wasn't working.
Oh, jeez. Oh, my goodness. Thank God we don't use it too much here, but still.
I love it in the winter.
Yeah. Yeah. It is
Yes.
nice.
Yes.
But there's water over there, too. I'm going to get a glass of water.
Jessica's coming, she had
No,
the
she's in the
flu.
restaurant. I just
Yeah.
got, she's in the restaurant.
She's terrific.
Mm.
So maybe she's gonna sit over there.
Yeah.
Oh, now you know
I
how
called
this.
yesterday, I'm like, okay, thanks for calling. Hi. Okay, I'm gonna give this to Mr. West. Okay, thank you. I was gonna say, did that person sign in for public comments, or do they?
They should.
Yeah, she's got, I was gonna give that to Wes, but I'll give it to you.
start putting
If I
it.
hit it. There you go.
Voila.
Howdy, howdy.
Lead start today, right? Lead start.
Yeah.
The last.
Kevin, do you have any instructions?
Is this thing
for us?
on? Fly me to the moon.
We are the guinea pig for the first commission board to be off-site. It is being recorded and hopefully will be aired. We're still working, Kevin crosses his fingers. But nevertheless, when you speak, speak into the microphone so we can get clear volume. And they should be on.
On? Yep. Okay.
Close to you, got it.
Thank you.
Right, so it's 3:13 on May 8th, 2017, in the Human Rights Commission meeting here in the Convention Center in Mesquite Room B. Right. Jill Scott, would you lead us in the flag salute?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sam, will you read the mission statement?
The mission of the Palm Springs Human Rights Commission is to promote and protect the diversity of our community and to improve human relations through education and community awareness.
Roll call.
Chairman Reckons,
Oh, present.
Commissioner Shelgis. I'm sorry.
Present.
Ms. Tappan.
Here.
Sir Gerano.
Here.
Present. Holstein. Traveling out of town. Hunt. Not present. Sutton Weiss.
Here.
And the student representatives are not in attendance. Posting the agenda in accordance with the requirements have been posted Thursday, May 4th, 4 p.m. Thank you.
And this is a time where we set up wait time for persons who wish to speak on a topic within the city's jurisdictions. During this portion of the agenda, you must file a speaker card with the staff liaison before that portion of the agenda is called. It's 3 minutes per speaker, and although the commission values your comments pursuant to the Brown Act, it is generally cannot take any action on items not listed on the posted agenda. Commissioners will not enter into discussion with speakers, but during commission comments may refer the matter to staff for report and recommendation at a future commission meeting. First person that we have is Judy. I can't pronounce your last. Deer Track.
Yes, ma'am. Well, that speaker, the stand is.
Oh, at the,
Yes.
Thank you. Very glad to be here this afternoon. My name is Judy Deertrack, and it's been several years since I've been here. And that's unfortunate because you're a very important committee. And I also have been quite busy the last 4 years. There's reasons where I haven't had a chance to go back, as I usually do, and go through the subcommittees, the boards and commissions of the city. I am running now for city council, And between now and the election, I will be monitoring the agendas and the activity of the advisory councils very closely. But I also want to explain that my removal from doing that in the last 4 years was not because I felt you were any less important because I was not running for office. But I did a research project, and it took me from 5,000 to 7,000 hours. And that research was for the city. It was, for the most part, almost exclusively introduced to the city administrators, the city planning department, and the city council, architectural advisory committee, and the planning commission. And I worked with a group of people called People for Proper Planning to finish a major study on what they called how the city processes commercial permits. And we came out with the conclusions on that. The reason I'm going back now is that that research has been completed and my time is now available to broaden out and reconnect to the committees. The other thing is that there were findings from that work that I've done, I think, that are extremely important to human rights, to civil rights, and to diversity in this community. Because essentially what it does when you deal with commercial permits, it is where you choose to put the subsidies, where you choose to put the commercial activity, which neighborhoods you choose to enhance, which neighborhoods you may choose to neglect, where the road improvements go, where the road improvements do not go. And that has a direct bearing upon opportunity and quality of life. And what I would like to do is bring the findings of some of those studies back into the groups now and discuss the correlation between land use, economic incentives, subsidies and programs that come out of the general plan, and what types of opportunities people have. And the other thing I would like to look at is there racial discrimination? Is there gender discrimination? Is there any classification discrimination in terms of where money goes? Does it go to a classification of people that are more favored than another classification? And I think that that is a very important question.
3 minutes. 3 minutes.
Was that 3 minutes? Thank you, and I'm hoping to return and continue the dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And our next person will be Ms. Tamika, was that Raquel? I know, but the last name is Rochelle.
My name is Tamika Foots-Rochelle. I'm the Regional Manager for the State Council on Developmental Disabilities. It's just more of soliciting your assistance. Recently, as we know, the American Health Care Act has passed Congress at a vote of 217 to 213. And so I have been reaching out not only to Congressman Ruiz's office, but also to other nonprofits and community partners that will be greatly impacted, mainly our older population and people with disabilities. So we are collecting stories in my office. Our executive director is actually hand delivering those to Washington, as well as for Congressman Ruiz's office. So if you know of anybody who's willing to tell their story, share their information and how Medicaid helps them or impacts them in any way, whether it be special education in school, medical services, or whatever the case may be, please, by all means, they can come to my office, they can call my office, and we'll be happy to help them tell their story. That's it. Thank you.
Now we have set aside where we go into our topics that we chose at our retreat in September. We actually chose 3 broad topics: homelessness, race relations, and now we're going to step in because we'll step into our 3rd topic, last but not least, which is human trafficking. So we go with our guest speaker, and I'll let Commissioner Sutton Weiss do the introduction to our guest speaker today.
Wonderful. I don't think this is on, but maybe I don't even need it. I'd just like to thank Kristen Dolan for coming out today to speak to us on human trafficking, as it is still a big problem that we have, and we have not been able to get a handle on that. So Kristen is with Operation Safe House, and I'd just like to introduce her to come up to the microphone and give us her presentation. Thank you, Kristen.
Couple things I'll give to each one of you. Wonderful. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Now I'll do this. Go. Thank you.
Is it food?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Wonderful.
I have my presentation on my phone, so if you see me looking down, I'm not bored with you. I'm just
If you
making
would like
sure
to
I'm
sit
not-
down, you can.
Can I?
Yeah.
Is this on? Okay. Well, thank you for having me. As Deborah said, I'm Kristen Dolan. I'm the Anti-Human Trafficking Director for Operation Safe House and Safe House of the Desert, which locally is located in Thousand Palms, right by the fire station off of Ramon. Human trafficking is such a diverse topic that I want to make sure that everybody is on the same page, our audience, and all of you. So there's a difference between smuggling and trafficking, right? So with smuggling, you have somebody who is paying money to cross a border, an international border. It's a crime against a country. Plus, when you come here, if you're coming from Mexico into the United States, you're free to go from the person who brought you here once they do so. And then finally, you're agreeing to this. You have consent, you know fully what's involved, you're approving of the whole process and accepting the consequences if you're caught. Trafficking is a bit different. Trafficking, crime against a person, and while movement is suggested, trafficking, I wish we had like a different name for it, because trafficking always suggests that there's so much movement, and there is. But there doesn't have to be. You can be trafficked by your parent in your home, never having left, and it's still considered human trafficking. Also, there's no implied exit. So as in smuggling, where you're leaving that person, there's really a couple different reasons why you're not leaving, and a lot of them are psychological because it's such a crime of psychological manipulation. So a smuggling case can become a trafficking case. So if you pay somebody $10,000 to cross the border from Mexico into the United States, and then when you get here, that person says to you, now you owe me an additional $10,000 for fees, transportation, whatever, you're going to work that off either through labor or sex. Now we have a trafficking case. And so when we are looking at, is this person a victim of human trafficking, we look at something called the AMP model. We need an action, a means, and a purpose. So with the action, there needs to be a transporting, a harboring, an obtaining, or any attempts to do so for the purposes of, by means of force, fraud, or coercion. So whether that person is violently being forced to do something, whether they thought they were coming to do a job in a restaurant for a normal day's work, normal day's pay, and then it turned out to be working all sorts of hours, not getting paid very much, sleeping very little, or coercion. We've had it numerous times where a trafficker has said to their victim, if you don't do this, I'm going to go after your family. And then for the purpose of commercial sexual acts or labor. If it's a child, if it's somebody under the age of 18, we call them CSEC, commercially sexually exploited child. And for them, we need the action, and for where it says any attempts to do so, so either obtaining them, transporting them, any attempts to do so, if you so much as ask a child if they would like to have sex for money, you can be prosecuted. As Eliberto Jacobo found out, he was just convicted on over 62 felony counts, including human trafficking, for soliciting minors and adults on Facebook. He used Facebook for his entire means. But with children, we don't need force, fraud, or coercion because children can't consent to sex or labor. So we don't need that, but again, the purpose of commercial sexual acts, labor, or debt bondage. So when we look in Riverside County at what are we seeing most? Are we seeing labor trafficking or are we seeing sex trafficking? What we are seeing as a task force is sex trafficking of minors who are female. We know there's labor trafficking. We know that there are males doing this. We know that there are adults who aren't being found at the moment. But the majority of the cases that we're taking in are the females who are minors who are being sex trafficked. And most of them are domestic. So I get that question a lot. Well, you know, are they all girls from Mexico? And they're not. They're from within the Coachella Valley, within Hemet, within Riverside. And while I said there doesn't need to be movement in trafficking, there is a lot of it in Southern California because it's so easy to hop on the 10 and be out of state or link up in LA and be up north. So it's very easy to move a girl or a guy all throughout Riverside County. So we are seeing a lot of it. A lot of people then also ask, well, how do they get involved? And one of the myths that I want to dispel is that it's an us versus them. So whenever I talk to people and I can see it in their eyes, like, that would never be my child. That wouldn't happen to me. I wouldn't have done that. And I've heard people say it with domestic violence. You know, the minute somebody hit me, I would be gone. And then they find out they're not gone. Because on average, we know it takes 7 to 9 times for somebody to leave. And it actually takes a person 7 to 9 times before they leave the life as well, which is what we call sex trafficking, being in the life. And so with this process, there's 2 different main types of pimps. One of them is going to be the guerrilla pimp, and he's going to be the one, or she, to break through violence. So there is that, you know, that can be that kidnapping aspect of it. It can be, you know, everybody likes to reference the movie Taken, where she's just snatched up and across the country. It can happen that way. What we're mainly seeing in Riverside County is the Casanova or the Romeo pimp. And this guy looks like a boyfriend. This guy is promising all sorts of things. You know, dinners out, and dinners out aren't Mastro's, it's McDonald's, you know, so they're not really like but the kids feel special. It feels like somebody's paying attention to them. And so when we're looking at the types of victims that fall prey to this so easily, we're really looking for vulnerabilities. What is that child missing in their life that this trafficker or this pimp could become? And he's looking for that too, or she. So it's, how do you tell someone what love doesn't look like and have them believe you? I mean, even as a kid, I remember my mom trying to tell me, like, that boy's no good. And I was like, you don't know my life. And of course, we all say that because we think they don't know. So how do you tell a 14-year-old girl who most likely has a history of sexual abuse in her past that this guy who's promising her love, protection, affection, that this isn't the guy for you? And he does everything he says he's going to do. So he's built trust with them. It's a twisted trust, but through trauma bonds, through the rape she'll endure, through the beatings that she'll endure, she comes to find herself at fault for all of what has happened. Of course he beat me. I didn't meet my quota. Of course he didn't feed me. I didn't make us enough money for tonight. What was he supposed to do, let that slide? These are things we've actually heard from our victims. One girl even said, because she had been basically held hostage within the Coachella Valley, we had to use law enforcement to go in and find her. They found her, brought her out, and when we spoke with her and said, you know, we know the kind of conditions you were in. What was it that was positive for you in that situation? And one of the things she said is every morning he said good morning to me. That was it. That's all it took. And she was hooked on him. She loved the fact that somebody every day cared enough to say good morning. And he was also the guy who was brutally torturing her and selling her. I've seen it with parents. A lot of the gangs are getting involved now in human trafficking. And when they do, sometimes the parents are already involved in that gang. So we had an instance where a girl, her parents, both of them, her dad was an OG within the, I believe it was the Bloods. Her mom had been with him for a very long time. The dad had pimped the mom for years. The daughter saw this. The daughter was pimped by the mom from a very early age. And this is what she saw for herself. This made sense to her because it was in her community. It was normal for her. So kids who are being raised around gang culture, or who get involved in gang culture as a young person, they don't know any better. They literally don't know any better because this is what their world has looked like for so long. And when I talked to this girl, because she was about to turn 18 and leave us, and I said, let's put you in witness protection. Like, let's get you out of this. You don't have to go back. Because she said she had to go back and put in work. And I asked what that meant, and it meant that she needed to go back and steal, turn tricks, whatever the gang asked her to do, that's what she had to do. And that was the agreement they had with her family, that as long as she was at Safe House, she was not to be touched. But that when she turned 18, she would come back and she would put in work. And if she didn't come back, and this was her worry and her reason for not entering into witness protection, if she did not come back, they would kill her mother and make it look like her father did it. So the people who sold her to other people from a very young age, she still wanted to protect. And that's what we're looking at when we're trying to convince these girls that what has happened to them was manipulation, that it was forced, that they didn't choose this as much as they think they did. And we hear our victims say too, I chose this. I was the one that told him where I was going. I was the one that was in control of him. He wasn't in control of me. Except we know that he was. And as a society, when we look at it, people will say that they want to help our victims, but they want to help our victims once we've identified them. But if they see them outside and about, they might think differently of them. And so I'll show you. If you have a 35-year-old high school male teacher and he sleeps with a 14-year-old female, his student, historically speaking, who is the person that's going to be charged criminally first?
The teacher.
The teacher. Why?
Well, she was older.
Authority figure. She wasn't old enough. Now I want you to take them out of school, and I want you to put those same two people on the street. And I want you to see that 35-year-old male pay that 14-year-old girl for sex. Historically speaking, before January 1st, who would have been charged with something criminally?
Oh, my God.
A girl. The only difference is that money exchanged hands. And we look at that money, right? We look at that money and we say that it has some kind of intelligence. That because she knew what it was, she must know what she's doing. She probably wanted a new Kate Spade purse. She probably wanted whatever. She's a child making adult decisions. She knew what was happening, how disgusting, how shameful. That's our victim, though. That girl is no more intelligent out on that street than she was in school. Her brain is no more developed than it was when she was in that classroom. And yet in the classroom, we protect her fully, and we don't blame her. So with the passing of SB 1322, which happened on January 1st, California became one of the first states, I think it's the first state, but don't quote me on that, to decriminalize children from prostitution. So the big headline was that California just legalized child prostitution. And so everybody was up in arms. What is California doing now? But the goal and the aim of that was to stop law enforcement from being able to arrest children on a crime of prostitution, which they're not allowed to do now. It's great on one hand. On one hand, it allows for us to find the children resources much quicker than we would have been able to before. Law enforcement must turn them over to DPSS, which would provide them with resources and get them in touch with us as well. But it also keeps law enforcement from being able to detain these children and separate them from their pimp, which can be critical. So it's not a perfect bill by any means, but it's a step towards not re-victimizing these children who have previously been criminalized, have been previously told that it is their fault. So when they come to us and say it's not my fault, they've probably never heard before, or when they say it is their fault, they've probably never heard before that they didn't agree to it, that they were manipulated. I mean, think of the last time somebody tried to tell you that someone pulled the wool over your eyes on something. We don't like to admit that. We'll go really far not to admit that. And we're adults. So we have these kids who, they don't know any better yet. They don't understand that that guy didn't love them. They don't understand that we're trying to help them. And they're not comfortable with it either. They don't have a lot of trust with us in the beginning because they know what that pimp is going to do. Like I said before, it makes sense to them that they get beat or they get withheld food or sleep because they didn't meet their quota or do what they said they were going to do. And so when we come in and we're not asking them to meet a quota, we're asking them to do the dishes, and we're giving them a place to stay, and we're not asking for anything from them other than that they behave, that they stay with us, that they work their programs. They don't know how to react to that. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel normal anymore. And so it freaks them out. And so a lot of times they run. Luckily, because of the work that we do, they come back to us. And that's not always the case with a lot of places. So not to toot our own horn on this, but I think we're doing something right. I think we're starting to get the idea of how to handle these kids, how to handle our victims. Now, when we look at it on the larger scope of Riverside County, Operation Safe House is the co-founder of the Riverside County Anti-Human Trafficking Task Force. We co-founded it with the Riverside County Sheriff's Department back in 2010. And so we have been working with them for a long time on trying to figure out how to best move ahead with tackling this issue. And it's not easy. It's taking a lot of awareness. I think that that's the first place to start, because once we get more eyes on it, once we have people who can identify who these children are and these adults, because it's happening to the adults. And if we think about, so the average age of getting involved is 12 years old. If you see that person 6 years later as an 18-year-old, they've been involved in this industry for 6 years. Any job on my resume I've had for 6 years, I'm like, I have a lot of experience, I can get a job anywhere else, like this is great. But what kind of options do they have? 6 years worth of doing this, of being trafficked, of being forced, of being sold. So when we see them at 18, they're not all that advanced then either. Just because they turned 18 and became an adult doesn't mean that all of a sudden they were downloaded all the information of the world of what they could do or the possibilities open to them. So even when we see adults that it's happening to, we need to realize that they were most likely once children who it was happening to. And when we're starting to hear more stories, there was a story in Palm Desert last year of 3 people being arrested for trafficking a 15-year-old. And that's only one of the cases that we've had out here. When we start to hear that, I'm even starting to work with the media on the language surrounding things. There was a story recently done about a man in Blythe who coerced a girl into his car, and she was 16. And the media called her a prostitute. And I was freaking out at home, but they don't know. They don't know what to call her. They don't know that she's a victim. They don't know that this isn't something that she chose. And so I'm working with the media to try to figure out how do we shape the conversation? How do we work on the language? There was even a story, I believe it was last year, could have been 2 years ago. KESQ did the story, and it was about the escort license that Palm Springs has available. Not for sex, it's just for companionship, but you do need to get an STD test and a medical clearance to obtain it. Apparently only one person has done that so far, and they interviewed a man who said that this was bad for his business, that if he was going to have to get a license to do all this, it was going to cut into his bottom line. And I remember thinking they just interviewed a pimp. They just put a pimp on the air. And so I talked to the reporter, and I was like, do you know that you just had a pimp on the air? You gave him airtime to complain about his business. And he was like, yeah, he was very clear about what he was doing. And I was like, I know we're trying to see like all sides of a story, but I feel like giving a pimp airtime is probably something we could hold back on. So with the Riverside County Anti-Human Trafficking Task Force, We have our law enforcement partners that we work with the FBI, Homeland Security. We work with all major departments, anything we need in order to get a case prosecuted or to even just get a pimp arrested. We are the service provider, the victim service provider. So what we do is provide intensive case management, victim advocacy, any kind of shelter or housing that they might need. We find it, any mental health services, medical, dental. We refer out for those. We do translation services, so if we come upon somebody that does not speak Spanish, then we are able to work with a translation service to get them the person that they need so we can communicate. We also do immigration and legal services. Well, we don't do it, we refer out for it. Basically, whatever they need, we're getting them in touch with those resources. My case managers have even gone to college campuses on tours with some of our victims, just so that they had somebody there to guide them. We have a lot of community partners that we work with all throughout Riverside County that allow us to provide the resources that we have and do what we do. So it takes a lot of moving parts to accomplish all this. Now, if you were going to see a victim in Riverside County or in the Coachella Valley, what would that look like? You have a card with you, a 4x6 card that has some of the identifiers on the back of it. So you'll want to start looking for evidence of someone being controlled. You want to look for somebody with new tattoos. And if it's a child of yours, or if it's just somebody that you interact with a lot and you notice that they all of a sudden have a new tattoo or scarring or cigarette burns or something, you want to start asking a couple questions. Where did you get that tattoo? What does it mean? Because the pimps will brand their victims. They will permanently brand them so that they know who they belong to. Girls can have multiple branding tattoos depending on how many pimps they've had. And so it's important that we look at that. If kids are coming into schools or into your home or wherever and they have new electronics and you know that they couldn't afford one iPhone, let alone the second one that they happen to have, start asking questions. Where did you get that? If a child has separation anxiety from their cell phone, normal separation anxiety is fine. I get a little nervous when I don't know where my phone is. But if somebody is freaking out over the fact that their cell phone has been removed, you might want to do a little investigating. Why is that? Who's calling that you're so worried about? Because these pimps will check in with them, and they want to know where they are and what they're doing and when they'll see them again and all of it. No knowledge of the local community. So if there was a child, so a lot of what we see with children in labor trafficking, and not all kids doing this are being labor trafficked, but some of them, selling candy bars. You see those kids out there, it's 100 degrees, there doesn't seem to be another adult around, and those are the easiest ones to ask questions with. So you want to find out, well, why are you selling this? What's the mascot for Palm Springs High School? Indians. So let's say the kid said, oh, well, I'm doing this for a fundraiser at Palm Springs High School. And you say, oh, you guys are the Bears, right? And they go, yeah. No, they're not. They're the Indians. So anywhere you can test knowledge of local community without being too conspicuous, just figure that out. And then you want to call the National Human Trafficking Resource Hotline, which is on that card also. It's 888-3737, 888. So if you ever see somebody that you even remotely suspect could be a victim, give that number a call. If it's somebody closer to you that you know, then you can call us at Safe House and make a referral, and we can start the process of working with them. Our programs, all of them at Safe House are voluntary. So if somebody decides that they don't want to be there or work with us anymore, they don't have to. There aren't any lockdown facilities within California, so we can't just keep them there. As far as Safe House on the whole, I'll just give you a brief overview of our programs. We have our emergency shelter for 11 to 17-year-olds. We have Harrison House, which is our transitional living program for youth ages 18 to 22. It's an 18-month program for chronically homeless youth. We have a school on each campus. That school allows the emergency shelter children who are 11 to 17 to be able to continue learning while they're in with us for our 3-week program. We have a mental health unit that works in the schools to provide stress in your mood, which is up to 20 sessions of free therapy. We have Cup of Happy, which is working to reduce mental health stigmas. And we have, we had another program. We have CBITS in Riverside. And then one of the things that we have out here in the Coachella Valley that we do not have in Riverside is our group home for girls who have been sex trafficked ages 14 to 17. It's a bed facility, and it's usually full. So our case managers at any one time have, and I have 4 of them, 3 full-time, 1 part-time. They are handling 15 to 20 cases apiece per month. And our law enforcement partners, there are 4 investigators, and each of them is handling 40 to 50 cases a month. So it is something that's happening in Riverside County. It is happening here in the Coachella Valley. And I really appreciate that you've allowed me the time to talk about this today. And if you have any questions, I would love to answer them.
I'll open it up to, thank you first and foremost for coming. Thank you, I believe Tamika, you was instrumental in help securing the guests with Deborah, Commissioner Sutton-Weiss, so thank you very much. Again, we tackled some deep subjects this year, and this is not an easy one. I mean, my stomach was just kind of knots over here. So I'm going to open it up to any questions that any of commissioners may have.
Okay, so I'm wondering that in the public schools, people who are employees of the schools have to report anything that they think is a possible concern. So if a concern is reported that could be something like this, does Child Protective Services get in touch with anybody? Are they trained to realize if that's something?
They are. So a couple years ago, it wouldn't have been the case that they were, but especially the Department of Public Social Services, they received a grant from the state, the PACT grant, protecting and addressing child trafficking, and that allowed them to train a number of staff on CSEC, on commercially sexually exploited children. And so a lot of them have the training to not only identify it and spot it, but also get in touch with us and report it to us so that we can provide case management in any gaps where they're not able to.
Okay, and then the kids selling candy and bracelets, there is a lot of that in Palm Springs. Is there any kind of a team that goes out and just kind of looks for that kind of
We don't
activity?
have an outreach team out here. So unfortunately, we rely a lot on the community to be able to spot it and call it in. And in fact, knowing that while I have one case manager out here in the desert and she's able to do presentations and create awareness, I'm usually the other person who's going out and doing it. And so I have a lot of ground to cover.
Okay.
We just trained 3 volunteers to be able to go out and do presentations as well. So hopefully with that, with the addition of 3 other bodies, we'll be able to cover a lot more here in the Coachella Valley, get a lot more eyes on it, and therefore get more reports in so that we're able to help them. Because once you call the human trafficking hotline, that 888 number, they will take down the information that you have, and then a lot of times they'll ask you to call local law enforcement on the non-emergency number and just report it, and law enforcement will go out and do a welfare check and see if anything's going on, what might be happening. So we always hope that they're able to catch them in time and find out what's happening. But it's kind of, yeah.
Yeah. No, thank you.
Yeah.
What are your funding sources? Where do you get funding for your program?
Our funding, a lot of it is federal, so we receive money from the Office of Victims of Crime, and that, we actually received a grant in 2015 that was only given to 16 task forces throughout the country, and our task force was one of them.
Good.
So we'll be reapplying soon, and hopefully we'll receive it again, but the competition's becoming pretty fierce out there. And so our funding is from there. We also have California Office of Emergency Service funding. That allows us to have one clinician and one human trafficking specialist within each of our emergency shelters. And because of that, we're actually becoming our highest referrer, because we're finding that the kids that are coming into the emergency shelter, if they haven't already been involved in human trafficking, they at least know somebody who is, or they're at very high risk for it. So we're able to catch it a lot quicker. We also have some private funding from fundraisers and foundations.
So, who else is doing this transitional housing here in Coachella?
The Harrison House, so like 18 to 22?
Well, no, specifically for the emergency shelter for folks that are seeking support and help trying to get away from their pimp.
Oh, so our group home?
If that's
We have a
what-
couple different, so we have our transitional living program, which is 18 and 22, our emergency shelter, which is 11 to 17, and then our group home, which is for victims of sex trafficking,
Oh, okay.
who are 14
Yeah,
to
so
17.
are there other group homes or places where folks are able to go and tap those resources?
So we work with a lot of other group homes. Group homes specifically for victims we're the only one in the Coachella Valley. A couple of them are popping up in Riverside. San Bernardino has one, I believe. And so there's not a whole lot of them, and a lot of group homes are becoming a bit afraid that they're going to happen upon a human trafficking victim, and what are they going to do with them? The group home system is starting to go away. The system is changing, and so it's changing over to more of a foster care system is what they're gearing it towards. So finding shelter and housing is very difficult if it's not with us. And again, we only have 6 beds. So if you think about the number of victims we have, either children or adults, we're always at a loss. It's the #1 problem for any organization working with this population in California.
So when we look at what Operation Safe House does, so providing this housing in these 3 separate environments, I'm trying to find the additional link into the sex trafficking side of things and your work out into the community, in addition to the shelter that is provided. Is there staffing on within your team that's funded specifically for this community outreach to raise awareness and the education to help identify victims and put them in touch with resources? I'm trying to draw a connection with Operation Safe House.
How we do our outreach?
Yeah.
So we have, of my 9 staff, one of them, my marketing manager, she is able to, she coordinates our Protect and Prevent meetings, which happen once a quarter here in the desert, once a quarter in Riverside, and once a quarter in Marietta. So we do community outreach that way. We do community outreach by being invited to or inviting ourselves into different schools, resource groups, letting people know that we exist, letting people know what kind of services we provide. We do Days of Action, which is in accordance with SB 1193, which mandated that certain businesses are supposed to have a poster with information about human trafficking and who to call if they see it happening. The hard part about that is that we can put up a poster, and the fee for not complying is $500 the first time and $1,000 the second time. But the problem is that we don't have enough people to enforce that, and even if they do, to go after somebody for $500, it usually costs more than $500, so not a lot of places are going after them. So it's kind of a vicious cycle of even sometimes the things that we are doing that need to be done. My problem with the posters has always been, because I had a friend of mine who runs a restaurant, and anyone with a general liquor license is supposed to have this poster displayed prominently within their place of business. And the pushback I always get is, well, that's a buzzkill. I'm not putting up a human trafficking poster because people are in here to forget their worries. And my response is always, most people don't even know what's happening here, and what we don't know about, we don't even see. And so not only is the poster kind of invisible to some people because they don't think it happens here, they think it happens in Mexico and Thailand and other places, certainly not the U.S. and certainly not in the Coachella Valley. But it's absolutely happening here. And so that's always my argument. For the people who do know and who might need that number, it's great to have it displayed prominently. But a lot of people won't even see it because they don't understand that there's an issue.
Yeah.
So that's what we're working against, is trying to get enough of a word out. KESQ or CBS, that company is, I know, but I think one of them is doing a May sweeps piece.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure, I think it's local, Katie Widener is doing the story, which should air, I believe, on May 27th. So I'm really excited about that. I'm really excited about anytime I can reach a large amount of people, because that means it's one less tiny portion. Or I do Facebook Lives every Tuesday on our Facebook pages, talking about different human trafficking points. So trying to not need to be in person for somebody to hear about it or for somebody to understand human trafficking. So outreach is such a huge part of what we need to increase our hours in. But of my staff of 9, 3.5 of them are my case managers. The other 4 of them are in the shelter, and then I have my marketing manager. So we don't have a whole lot of room to create another team that would then go out and do more.
So Safe House really is focused on the housing once folks are identified.
Case management is what we focus on. So if housing is in need of theirs through that, then we absolutely would focus on housing.
So counseling and other services that the victim might need, the case manager helps connect them
Yes.
with those resources in the
Yes.
community. Okay.
Yeah, we kind of become.
And you have, there's 3 or 4 case managers?
4 case managers.
Okay. Okay, good. Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so this question? Well, thank you again for coming out and sharing.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for all your
and
questions.
Thank you, Kristen.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so we're going to go to our next agenda item. 9A, we're 2017, 2000, oh yeah, I'm sorry. Oh yeah. Jump right on to it. So yeah, approval of the minutes for April 10, 2017 meeting. Is there a motion?
I'll move approval.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Minutes are approved. Now we go to items 9A, and that's our 2017-2018 rollover budget. There was, I actually brought that up last meeting about, for you guys to start, thinking about what you might want for your budget for this year, going into next year, because I know Commissioner Sorello brought up a good thing about media information or, promotional items and stuff like that. However, Dale was kind to already email you guys, and you see that the budget is there for a few previous years of $2,000. There will not be any more allocated this year. I was told that. So you can look at it and then play around and see what you spend and what you didn't spend, and then you guys, it's there. Dale, do you want to say something about it?
I think also, too, what you need to consider is that there is a balance remaining. I did look at your marketing materials that we're using as outreach and participating in special events, and we seem to be well supplied. But in terms of doing any type of marketing pieces, there's only 2 months remaining within the fiscal year. So there may be a challenge of trying to bring together some type of published materials and working through a printing capacity. Suggestion you may consider is if you want to add to your marketing pieces, those who have participated in some of those outreach efforts, are there certain items that could be more beneficial in distributing to the public that could get the word out about human rights?
So
Are you-
use it before we lose it.
I'm sorry.
Use it before we lose it.
How much do we have left?
$370.
Well, that's for the whole budget.
That's left for the rest of the year.
Remaining balance.
And the budget ends next
So we
month,
have,
right?
we have 2 months to use $370,
Right.
because it does not roll over to the next
No.
year. Okay. We should figure out how we're going to do that. We shouldn't leave any money on the table.
Giveaways, pins.
And the team had talked about ordering more of the cards that aren't personalized, but it
Human rights.
says the Palm Springs
Human rights.
Rights
The business
Commissions,
cards.
so that we can
Mhm.
give those out
Mhm.
to people. I think that is a good
Mhm.
thing
Mhm.
to have
Mhm.
on our bodies to
Mhm.
give.
That's good.
I was given a stack of 5 that I
Yeah.
really monitored 2 years ago. I think I have one left, so
Vistaprint.
that's a really good thing to have.
Right.
And I think, too, that the team has the flyers that kind of tells about us at our
Table.
tables. So are we okay on those? I
The
wasn't
printing
at
of
the
the.
last event, but.
We have plenty of those. Yeah, we have the
Okay.
plenty of the flowers, yeah. So you guys still have, as long as we have to cut the check before the end of what, May, right? I mean, June, right? Yeah.
Placed an order.
Place the order, yeah. So, you guys, next month, so discuss that. Items 9B is going to be the 2017-2018 Chair and Vice Chair selection. That will be your July 10th meeting. It's always held the month after the terms end. So my term will be ending in June. Is there anyone else?
I think my term ends in June also.
You think?
I think so.
Okay, so, and then, so you guys come back, and Denise will carry on from there, and then you guys will vote for your chair, or vice chair. Okay? All right. Next one is 9C, which is next Friday, the Harvey Milk Diversity Breakfast at 9:30 a.m., and it's right here in in the Convention Center. Ron, DeHart, you want to give us a little information?
I understand we have a full table representing the commission at the breakfast. We should probably have a backup in case somebody calls and if there's a sick call. So I think we can task that to Dale if he might be able to find a backup in case there is an open seat at the last minute. But I'll be, as I've shared before, I'll have Javre will receive information on her spoken portion of the program, which is going to be nice to have her up there. And we'll also, I'll introduce her to the woman she's going to be at the podium with. And she's introducing all the elected officials and allies throughout all of Coachella Valley. So that'll be a good experience for her.
She loves it.
Yeah, so it'll be a good experience for her. Not that she's shy or anything.
Oh, she'll be good at that.
Yeah. So, and, you know, we're all good. I think it's 9:30 sharp it starts, and it will end at about 11 right now, right at 11 o'clock a.m.
Question for the commission and staff. Do we wear our shirts?
I was wondering that, Wes. We didn't last
We
year.
didn't last year, so that's what
But
I said.
again, that's an event where it.
So
and that's
people
an
should know who we
Yeah,
are.
event that
I
isn't
say-
political
I
that
And we will stand out.
we
Be a
should
pull
wear
of
them.
pink at that table.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're going to have that pink. Yeah, okay, so shirts, there it is.
Got it.
9D, so,
Mr. Chair,
oh,
before,
sorry.
before we move on to 9D, can we go back to 9B? I have
Okay.
a thought. Commissioner Chappelle's suggestion on doing the business cards would take some of that 370, right? Is that what we're, so this is a question for staff. Can we, since it looks like we might have some money left over, because at this point I don't know if we're going to be able to move forward with any more promotional materials other than just the business cards, are we allowed to move money within the budget, within the $2,000, from line item to line item?
You've not formally approved a budget by specific line items. You just have a budget amount of 2,000, and you have discretion to use it as you see appropriate.
Okay.
I would clarify on the business cards, they're generic.
Right.
They do
They
not.
don't have any
Right. So it
identifiers.
would have no bearing as to who your officers will be. So there are multiple uses through a
Right.
number of years.
Right.
That's good. So my thought was that if we can get an idea of how much the business cards will cost, if we can, at our next meeting, take this up again and maybe move the balance of whatever we have, since we have to have this done by the end of June, move the balance to sponsorship, and maybe sponsor something else so that we actually use the money, or sponsor an organization that we would like to contribute to. That would use up the balance and would actually be doing something good for the community as well. I just don't want to really leave any money on the table. So I'm
I
thinking,
understand, but I don't think we can give money, right? We can't give money, so we have to actually buy something.
So we can-
won't leave it on the table.
Yeah, we won't,
Huh.
yeah.
We
We
won't.
won't leave it on the table.
okay. All right, fine, that's good, that's good.
All right, so the next, we're going to, any more questions? So 9D, we got the ad hoc committees, and so we're going to go over for race relations. We had the ending piece, which is going to be the advocate piece, and so what that was is we were actually, the subcommittee wants to suggest that the Human Rights Commission again propose for Lawrence Crosley, Crosley Road / Golf Club Road be changed to Lawrence Crosley Road. I had a meeting with Trey Daniels on Friday, who actually initiated this whole name change, and it started back in 2014. It went in front of the Planning Commission, got unanimous approval from the Planning Commission, and then it goes in front of Council. Council approves it, and then the time elapsed. And then so they started the process again. Well, it's back there again. He had a suggestion to just start it over again with a petition endorsed by various commissions and organizations and start from scratch versus going back and asking the council to open it again, and then that way you have the petition. So again, that was a suggestion that he made as well. We have, for the new commissioners, we have already approved and recommended for the name change as well last year. And so, yeah, so that is something that we need to discuss, I believe, or put on the agenda for next month.
I would want to also seek clarification as a commission if it's appropriate for commissions or board to give support of any type of petition, a referendum type of, and I would be in a position to bring that back next month and we can have further discussions.
And is there a way that then we can ask, since we did make a recommendation that was approved, why, I mean, the Crosley issue is an issue? I mean, we know the supposed to be technical terms, but it's just really kind of sad.
I don't understand.
I think the question was the process in which the name change or a designation of a street name occurs. I don't believe it's within the preview of the Human Rights Commission. I believe it's more at the direction of Planning Commission, as well as involvement with city engineering and streets. So there is a formal process, but in terms of what is the actual responsibility that our commission may have, I would have to seek clarification. It may be more appropriate that the Planning Commission or even a formal letter to the new city engineer would begin that process all over. But I'll clarify and bring back for next month.
Good, perfect.
And did you have anything for human trafficking back there?
No, just thanks for allowing human trafficking to be a subject again this year. I hope it carries on next year.
Okay, and then Subcommittee 9E, Subcommittee reports. Any community outreach, Commissioner Sandra Sini?
Yes, I attended the Disconnected Youth Forum at the University of Riverside.
The microphone, please.
Oh.
Thank you.
I did do some outreach at I attended the Disconnected Youth Forum at the University of Riverside this month on behalf of the Human Rights Commission.
And community service was with me. I haven't sent you guys your personal pictures, I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Wes did share with staff the photographer's DVD. The pictures were excellent. To your request, that has been updated on the webpage. So yeah, with that 3 hits that we've had.
I go look. We have 5, we have 4. Thank you, Dale. And Commissioner Holstick is not here today to give us a report on homeless task force. Well, we didn't, Palm Springs Police Department LGBTQ Community Outreach Committee didn't meet last month, but is there anything you might know? And
The chief will be at, with the 2 captains, will be at the Army Milk Breakfast.
and he's doing a speech today. It was last night,
Yeah.
Sacramento, yeah, so that's really nice, that's good, yeah. And Commissioner Hunt's not here for parades, and I think we're parade done anyway. Social media, Dale gave us an update of our webpage, so woohoo, let's go hit it so we can have about 10 hits on that webpage. And no student representatives today, so anyone with topical newsworthy items? Anyone? Anyone? Okay, Commissioner comments? None? Staff?
I can't resist. I did circulate, the commission was in receipt of a request to participate in a statewide survey of the California Association of Human Rights Organizations. They're trying to outreach and see what type of resources that they can possibly provide to our human rights organizations, city commissions, and then offer the possibility of student internship if there was a project in which the commission, and we'll be getting more information about that.
Derek, are we a member of this organization?
I could not locate that we were, and at least at this time, they haven't asked us for a membership application, but it could be possibly something for next year's budget that we would want to include.
We might want to investigate with the benefits of belonging to this organization and see what they are. And that way, when we formulate the budget for next year, if we find that it's something that, would be beneficial to our commission and the community, that we might want to consider doing that.
I definitely think it's something definitely for you, like for retreat as well too. If you see it's something that can fit for you guys, it'd be something good. No?
Is
Yeah.
there a timing issue related to the survey that they're asking us to fill out?
It was an online monkey survey, so it was very minimal, so I went ahead and completed it. But they assured us that they would be being in contact with us to see if we would have any special projects or would be interested in an internship with a college student. If you're aware of other organizations that potentially that we could be involved in or join with, yes, yes.
Do you want to take a look at that and let us know, or I guess we can actually do it on our own as well?
More the merrier.
Okay, all of us, okay. We was-
I did add it for next month's agenda as
Oh,
well.
good. Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, so agenda items for next HRC meeting. I have a couple, actually. Along with the election of the chair, there's some probably positions. There's Deborah and I, if she's no longer going to be here, you guys need to think of a replacement for the PSPD LGBT Outreach Committee. We usually have 2. We have 3 now. So it really, you only, if Ron chooses to stay a part of it. It actually goes, you have an option, yeah. So then you guys need to kind of think of who will be that for the commission as well. And there's some other offices that I can't think right now that we have to.
Well, it would be chair, and we would, are you
We never
going?
did. It was about.
This is my last year, when I seen on my material. Del, can you check it on there for me? I think so, though.
Currently, right now, there are 3 vacancies on the commission. The 2 that are terming out, yourself and Wes, and then the vacancy that was left with Suzanne, that had not been filled during the midterm. So the council subcommittee will be interviewing candidates for 3 vacancies that are currently on. There, by the city code, it calls for the commission to elect select their officers the first meeting after. So it would be the July meeting. If by chance that the new commissioners are not seated, you could make a motion and moving it, as we did, till September. You did it actually at the retreat itself. So that's up to you. I think that it may be to the stronger advantage of selecting those who've already seated and are familiar with the organization of the commission and the task of the commission. New individuals coming on, they're not going to have that familiarization and foundation. So I would just think you could be able to move forward. But it is the 3. Now, in terms of outside organizations that are the Human Rights Commission participates or has a seat, I'm not familiar with all those, so we would want to notify.
Let me think of it and bring it back to us on, because there are several. And we usually.
So then, the question that I have is that I have heard that you can have 2 terms.
Mm-hmm.
So a total of 6
6, no more than
years.
7.
So then, when your term is done, coming done in 3 years, do you apply again?
You can.
Okay. Well,
You have to.
I'm just looking at the long-term piece, so I want to understand what has to be done.
If you're eligible.
Right,
Yeah, because it's not a guarantee.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just asking
Yeah,
so that
yeah,
I
no,
best
yeah,
understand
apply, and make sure you look
it.
at it, and, because a lot of people have missed that and missed the opportunity to be reappointed, so, just because of the interview, yeah.
Also, too, at the time that the council begins setting the subcommittees, assigning the subcommittees, they ask of all commissions and boards to provide the attendance record for that current year. So if you cannot have excessive absences.
Right, okay. Thanks.
So for the next meeting, in addition, can we get a list, you're probably going to work on this, of not only the chair and the vice chair, but also all the other positions that we
Yeah, 'cause it's not
elect
like
or
a
appoint
The
people
only
to?
one that we really kind of said the chair was to the CBD grant, yeah.
Right, and so we kind of have that outlined, our positions on 9E, correct?
Now, pretty much,
Right.
pretty much,
So
yeah,
you can
pretty
look
much.
at that,
Mhm.
except for there's, what is in here? The CC.
CBD, CBDG.
Right.
CBDG.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
And Main Street's not listed, but I
That would be-
formally attend Main Street every month.
Main Street.
Main Street.
Downtown Main Street.
Branding,
Yeah.
branding.
And I think too that it's good if it's okay, like if I wanted to attend something like that, or is it possible that we attend outside of our subcommittee just to learn about it?
Sure.
Well, I know,
So would
the
it
committees
be-
I'm on wouldn't have a problem with it,
So
yeah.
would
so,
it be
you know.
possible at our planning session, and you'll be gone, so it could have to be done before, but to give us the calendars of when all those things
Mhm.
happen, because I would really like to understand what
Yeah,
those
that's good.
people are
That's
reporting
good.
on.
Good, good. Because even the homeless task force, you know,
Right.
that was, you
Yeah.
know, volunteer, so
Right,
Christie might not
right,
want to.
so I think that that is a good thing to have in our books.
Good.
And like Ron's attending Main Street, it might be beneficial for us to actually, not appoint, but, you know, recognize that, so that you go as our representative, if,
Mhm. That's what we're
Yeah.
saying, branding, yeah, we're gonna start, yeah.
and just make it official, yeah, good.
Any other agenda items? Nothing? All right, so the next commission meeting will be Monday, June 12th at 3 p.m. I'm just going to say the Palm Springs Convention Center for now. Room to be determined.
Okay,
All right, and we are now adjourned.
thank you.
Thank you.
I will be in Hawaii. Jessica, you doing okay?
Down with the flu.
Thank you.
Down since last Wednesday.
I just really like that app on the phone.
Yeah, boy,
That's a safe pass, that's good to have that in case you're out and about and you see something strange.